Okay. No kaniko awaka sina no Christikoik. Don't do Piikani. I'd just like to welcome all of you this morning. My name is Reg Crowshoe. I'm from the Piikani First Nation in southern Alberta. And my indigenous name is Awakasina, which means dear chief. So I just want to welcome everybody this morning to our discussion. And I'll pass it over to...
Thank you, Elder Reg, Awakasina. It's good to see you all today. It's my pleasure today to introduce everyone to our moderator for this panel today. Chima Nkemdirim is the Vice President of Government Relations for Shaw Communications. He joined Shaw after serving as Chief of Staff to Mayor Nahad Nenshi, the City of Calgary, for more than 7 years. In 2011, he was appointed as Queen's Counsel by the Government of Alberta for his work in the legal profession and received the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal for his contributions to Canada in 2012. Chima is an active member of the community and volunteers his time with a variety of nonprofit organizations, including the Calgary Foundation, the Walrus Foundation, Calgary Arts Development, Arts Commons, and the Black Opportunity Fund. Thank you, Chima.
Thank you, Beth. Let us begin today by acknowledging that we are here in Mohkinskis, the traditional Treaty 7 territory, which is home of the Blackfoot Confederacy, which is home to the Siksika, the Kainai, and the Piikani, as well as the Stoney Nakoda and Tsuut'ina nations. We also acknowledge that this territory is home to Métis Nation Alberta, Region 3, and all the people who make their homes here in Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. The International Day of Elimination of Racial Discrimination recognizes the injustices and prejudice filled by racial prejudice. It's observed on March 21st. And it commemorates the day the police in Sharpeville, South Africa, open-fired and killed 69 people at a peaceful demonstration against apartheid pass laws. In Canada, it's a date that is used to reflect on the fact that while progress is made, people in Indigenous communities, racialized communities, and religious minorities in Canada continue to face racism and discrimination every single day. Today, we are here to recommit our efforts to combat all forms of racial discrimination and to discuss solutions and how we can move forward together. To that end, I'd like to introduce some of the people who've been gathered here today in Arts Commons on the Jack Singer stage to discuss solutions. So first, I'd like to introduce Dr. Reg Crowshoe, who is a spiritual and cultural advisor. He's the former chief of the Piikani Nation and is a ceremonial grandparent. His Blackfoot name, and I apologize in advance because my Blackfoot is very rusty, Akwesena, meaning dear chief in the Blackfoot language. And this is also his grandfather's name. As an elder and a bundle keeper, his father, Joe Crowshoe's teachings were instrumental to the Piikani cultural preservation. Welcome, Reg. We're also joined by Elder Rose Crowshoe, proud daughter of Elizabeth and Julius English, granddaughter of Sally and Charles Pete Provost Sr., and Emma and John W. English, mother and wife, Rosemary Crowshoe puts family first. Her indigenous name is, and again I apologize for my Blackwood, Akwamagi, and Elder Crowshoe has been recognized for her efforts in providing safe, ethical, relevant, and appropriate cultural teachings within the Calgary community for many years. Welcome, Rose. We also have over here, we'll switch over here to my left, Jacob Biggs. Jacob is a fourth-year University of Calgary student studying at the Haskayne School of Business and is also a two-time academic All-Canadian representing the Dinos football team. Jacob is also a male mentor and ambassador for Be the Voice, a mentorship program that empowers athletes to leverage their platform and use their voice to inspire positive change in their communities. We're also joined by Patti Pon. Patti is the president and CEO of Calgary Arts Development and is a veteran community and arts champion with an extensive track record in leadership and service in Calgary. She was recently deeply honored to be gifted with a Blackfoot name of Mistamoksamyaki, which means two standing headdress women. And anyone who knows Patti knows that's a very appropriate name. Patti has been awarded the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal, as well as the 2013 Harry and Martha Cohen Award, recognizing her significant contributions to the Calgary theater community. Beside Patti is Karli Crowshoe. Karli's Blackfoot name is Adun, and is a mother and a business owner of the Chief's Daughter. Karli recently graduated from the University of Calgary and holds a degree in international relations. Traditionally raised on the Piikani Nation, she grew up in ceremony guided by her grandparents, Reg and Rose Crowshoe. And on my left, Beth Gignac. Beth joined the United Way of Calgary an area as Chief Operating Officer in 2016 and is now the Chief Impact and Innovation Officer, which is a title I would love to have. With over 20 years of leadership experience and working across government organizations in Alberta, Ontario, Beth is a high-energy, collaborative leader dedicated to building resilient communities. So that is our panel today. We look forward to the conversation. I'm going to ask Reg to start us the discussion off in a good way.
Okay. I just want to start off this discussion in our traditional ways of gathering. And one of our traditional ways of gathering is to use the smudge. In our way, the sweetgrass was given to us to make smudge with. But the sweetgrass represents a concept or what we understand as natural law, but it represents sanctified kindness. And when we burn it, we represent a venue and a call to order when we light the smudge. So I'm going to light the smudge this morning. I'll acknowledge Creator for our safe space, our venue that we're going to call to order, and then we can have our discussion. I'll be acknowledging Creator in my language, which is Blackfoot, but it's also a Piikani dialect. So we, in our Blackfoot community, we know when somebody comes from Siksika, Gana community, or Piikani community, just by the dialect they speak. So my dialect I speak is the Piikani. So I'll acknowledge Creator, light the smudge to start our safe venue and sanctified kindness for all creation. Oh, kishipeda pio. Ayo kitans kachimadan Christikoi. Ai spomo kinana ano jetkanopis pinna. Ai spomo kinana psatoki. Kako achimo iskapinana Christikoi kako siskato pinan. Hanik daya kota pa peipo spinan istipata pio. Oh kimako jistapi taksa. Hanaka essapio mako jistapi chi shawanik tomukta daya kochipo spinan. Hao kap psatoki. Spomo kinana ako pachimo iskam stick ships I topi shoko so ao o go anoa o chita pimo do kanoa chimo o kini toi kako siskato pinan kada tapi wakho puksuka pu takim sao ni toi ako nas kanai ka kimo sak sukopos o kistipata pio kako siskato pinan kamutan nesta wachiman I just want to, first of all, say I'm glad we got our circle going in a safe way. I come from an oral culture, and an oral culture our narratives in creation, we call them in our language also experiences and connections that we have with all creation. Those experiences become our narratives that give us our way of life. So we believe that creation itself, the act of creation, is a jurisdiction, is a power. And whatever is created, that is a natural law. So whether it's water, animal, humans, plants, whatever is created, they're all natural laws. So as an indigenous person, I have to be responsible and transparent to those natural laws. So when I speak or when I gather with people, the smudge was given to us as a sanctified kindness for all creation. So when I burn my smudge, I'm asking Creator to give us all a safe space, even all creation. I heard the old people used to say in our language, there's no creation stronger than any other creation. Those are the words I hear from our ancestors. So when we look at that as a natural law, that narrative is a natural law. I have to be responsible and transparent to my laws, just like any other society around the world today. And when I'm being responsible, transparent, then I use my oral practices, such as the smudge, to provide sanctified kindness. And to call to order a gathering so that we can make decisions, have discussions. But also, from our narratives that gave us systems, oral systems, one of the key, I would say, laws would be that the smudge gives us relatives, building relatives. So when we burn our smudge and we come together as a group of people, even in our way, the sweetgrass is a creation, the smoke is a creation, the shell is a creation. We all come together as all creations. And when we come together as all creations, then the concept of building relatives is so important. It's going to be a group of people that got together, like creations got together to achieve a goal. And in our case, in our oral culture, those goals were survival. We had to survive within the context of the environment, and the whole environment becomes our relative, and all the people become our relatives in a system way. I would say today, in Western written systems and Western organizations, they don't understand the concept of relative building. They understand concepts like partnerships and allyships, because you can sign those papers and become a partner to achieve the goals. But in our way, because of the law of sanctified kindness and nobody's stronger than anybody else and we all have to survive together, we need everybody, everything that was created to survive, and we make them relatives in our oral systems and organizations. So as a group of relatives, we can achieve those goals. So those are some of my understanding that I look at with regards to the topic of racism we're talking about today. A while ago, I was asked to find a Blackfoot word for racism. So I went back to Blackfoot speakers and the elders, and I asked them, we're looking for a word for system racism. And they started their discussion. They can find words that relate or kind of describe what racism is, but they never found a word for the actual racism. And the elder said, how can we have racism when no creation is stronger than anybody else? Even COVID is not as stronger than us. We have to work together to survive. So that was my upbringing and understanding that I didn't even recognize that there was racism when I was a young child, because I believed in those natural laws.
Thank you so much, Reg, and thank you for creating the smudge and creating a safe space for us to have this conversation. I'm going to go from one generation to the next, and Karli, I'm going to look at you. And I was wondering if you could, share an experience about systemic racism, and how do you think we promote change to heal and move to that concept of relationships that we're all relatives, which I think is such a beautiful idea.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chima. I'm really excited to be here with my grandparents. I always thought one day, I never thought the day would come we're on the same stage sharing our ideas together, so it's really amazing. My great-grandfather, Joe Crowshoe, he worked his whole life to create safe spaces for Indigenous people in institutions, and then my grandfather took that and ran with it, and now I'm here with them, so it's come full circle almost. So I'm very excited. When I was thinking about systemic racism, so I grew up traditionally with my grandparents and my sister. I grew up immersed in the cultural experience. I grew up smudging, ceremony, dancing every day of my life. And then when I was in grade 5, we had somebody come to the school in Piikani in Fort Macleod, and they did these tests on the students to see which ones had the ability to obtain a higher education. So they came and tested the Indigenous students, and then I ended up moving to Calgary to go to a Catholic school, and I was the only Indigenous person there. I think it was, grade 5. I had no friends, nobody to talk to. It was very a culture shock because I didn't have anybody. I grew up going to school with my cousins. I was in societies with my peers. That was my school, being on the land, speaking the language, living in teepees. So when I was brought into the city at such a young age and experiencing that, it was a shock for me. And then not only did I experience that, I continued my education and went into French immersion school. So I was really taken out of my safety, of my grandparents' love and that home, and just really thrown into the world. But growing up, my grandparents always told me it's super important that you're able to get an education. Education is really important. It's something I grew up hearing in my family from my great-grandparents. So I kind of took that and I went through my education understanding in order to help my people, to help people from back home, I needed to educate myself. And then I went into university, and that was more of a shock to me because I was excited to be in a post-secondary institution, excited to learn more, and I knew at the University of Calgary they had other Indigenous students, And I thought, this is going to be great. This is going to be awesome. I'm going to be studying with other Indigenous students. I get to collaborate and see how their experiences were. But little did I know that my fellow Indigenous students at the University of Calgary did not have the same upbringing as I did, meaning due to colonization, intergenerational trauma, they weren't able to grow up with their grandparents. They weren't able to grow up in the culture because of that colonization in those residential schools. They took that from their grandparents. So it's honestly a miracle that we're here. It's honestly a miracle that my grandfather's here and he has his doctorate of law. It's like statistically, I'm not supposed to be here. And I'm a mother to a 6-year-old and a 4-month-old. Actually, today he's 5 months. So I'm a mother, I'm a business owner, and I have children, and I'm educated, and I'm going to get my master's. And you look at it and you think, wow, that seems really nice. That seems really amazing. But underneath that, those traumas, you have to fight twice as hard to get to school. People look at you automatically and they think of you differently. Even like in the store last week, people follow you. They watch you and they look at you to see if you're stealing. Little do they know who I am as a person, what I have to offer, but they make those assumptions due to that systemic racism. I really noticed it too being at the university, because I was raised in a different world of oral tradition and culture, being taken from that and being put into a world of the written system, trying to understand, trying to compete, because within that world there is a top-down type approach. In the life I grew up in, I was immersed in my education. My mental health was taken care of. I was loved. I experienced the earth. I experienced learning in a different way. But within this world, you have to navigate. You have to go to different institutions to navigate your well-being. So you're attending like therapy to better your mind. You're going to school to gain more knowledge. You're going to all these different institutions, whereas when I grew up, that one institution was my family, my surroundings, my culture. So trying to navigate that, I had a culture shock. I started to question who I was. And what was really scary for me was you go to university more so to become a critical thinker. So I started going home and really questioning my culture, questioning my grandparents, questioning why we do what we do. But the only thing that really brought me back to that spirit of who I was the smudge, was the culture and the smudge, and staying connected to who I am. Now that I'm graduated and I'm working again, I feel in order for us to move forward from this institutional racism, we need to get to know each other on a personal level. And it's funny how a lot of organizations now are having Indigenous strategies and indigenizing their staff and their work environment. But it's all about making relations. So making relations to me is getting to know somebody, getting to understand who they are, sharing our stories. So I think it's just as simple as that. It's not just everyone, like I said, we have that top-down approach. Let's like dog-eat-dog world type of thing. Like you work really hard to get to that top, and then what? I think as Indigenous people, it's really amazing that we work together for a commonality. And that's how we were raised. So being able to share my story and share who I am genuinely is going to break that racism. It's going to cut it off, and hopefully my children don't have to deal with it. But it's funny because also we're so inclusive of gender, right? We're so inclusive, and we try not to assume gender with other people. But I can go to the store, or I go to the restaurant with my son, and he has really long hair, and people automatically assume that he's a girl. So it's my responsibility, like my grandfather said, it's our responsibility, the gifts and the rights that we were given, to move forward and pave a better path for my children and other Indigenous children.
Thank you so much. That's beautifully said. And you talked about the culture shock of going to university, and university has got this idea that, oh my God, everyone's here to learn, and it's going to be this really inclusive environment, and then it can be quite a surprise, kind of challenging. So why don't we ask someone who is in university right now? Jacob, you're currently studying at the University of Calgary. Share your story.
Yeah, wow, thank you so much. I'm still thinking about Karli's message. That was an amazing message. I don't think something has, gotten to the core of me in a long time, and I think that's something that, needs to be heard more. There's a lot of those stories that go unheard, and that's the unfortunate part. I think Karli said it perfect. At the end of the day, everyone is able to see where she has gotten to as a businesswoman, as mother. Everyone sees the result, but not the beginning. And I think that's something that needs to be spread throughout school, education, university. And through Karli's history, I think there's a lot of similarities with minorities. Everyone has a similar story. I went through some of the same things that Karli did, but I think the important thing is to stretch education. Growing up, I'm 22 right now, so growing up in the time that I did, I think I was very fortunate, especially having a biracial history. My parents, my dad being black, my mom being white. I think I grew up in a community where going through adversity was something that was just the norm, and I think I got to teach and, I got to learn a lot from them, how they faced it. Just growing up through my mom and my dad, both amazing people, great educational backgrounds. They've striven in their, business attributes and whatnot. And so I think they were able to teach me a lot that was wrong with the system, stuff that I would have to go through, and created a spot where, I was able to then pass it on to the next generation. And that's what I'm trying to do now, especially at the university. And as Karli said before, it is a place where I think you do lose a lot of attachment to your culture. You are immersed in a position where you do meet a lot of people from different areas, but I think that at the end of the day, there is a position where the norm is to excel, and I think there's competition. Obviously, that's part of university, but I think there's a chance that you detach from your history and what matters culturally. And so I think the importance is just continuing to have these open conversations, like Karli said, being able to spread the message, and again, teach the younger generation who are upcoming how to deal with systemic racism, and be aware that it's something that exists. I think that's something that a lot of people aren't able to necessarily understand, but have to be more aware of, is that it is something that exists. It is something that people of minority are going to have to face. And again, as Karli's amazing story, that is something that should be shared. That's something that should be taught. And I know that she's going to teach that to her kids when they grow up, because it's something that they should be aware of. It's something that they're going to face, and hopefully by the time they're grown up, they don't have to face something similar. But again, it's just being able to educate the youth, being able to share amazing stories like that, being able to create a safe environment for talking. And I think that's what we've done today. This meeting has been such an amazing reminder that tragic stories can be shared openly and without confrontation. And so this is something that we need to normalize throughout, university, throughout schooling at such a young age, where kids become used to talking openly about situations that are, difficult to talk to. And so that's been one of my goals with the start of Be the Voice Foundation. Colleen, the founder, she brought up the idea of creating an environment of athletes that were able to communicate a message to younger students. And essentially, these messages stressed on the points of gender-based violence, racial discrimination, and just built a position of inclusivity. And essentially what we wanted to do was we wanted to break the barrier of more so ignoring a problem and trying to get to a better tomorrow. We wanted to open the problem and discuss about it, figure out how we could change our position and stance and move on to a better future. And so we created this platform, this communicational platform, and brought in different members throughout the nation, and quickly expanded. And it was amazing to see how many people from all ethnical backgrounds were so enthused to be part of this program. And it just goes to show you that no matter your cultural background, your skin color, your religious beliefs, that at the end of the day, a lot of people have the same goal. They want to break these barriers. I think that's something that our generation is now seeing. A lot more people are taking a stance and moving towards, breaking these gender and racial barriers. And so it's amazing to see. And I guess the biggest thing for myself, and where I probably more so experienced or heard systemic racism, was actually from myself talking to the younger generations. And as being a voice mentor, you go to different high schools and you talk to these young students who inevitably I can't even begin to explain some of the things that they've been through. And that was a hard position, is seeing that, it's something that Karli and myself have experienced and it's still going on. So again, it was just being able to openly discuss with them, this is something that we've been through, you're still experiencing, here are some things that you can do. Again, it's always good to talk about these problems. They're difficult, but at the end of the day, that's how we grow as people. So again, just continuing to build on that pillar of education, moving towards, creating a friendly environment and acknowledging environment. And so that's kind of the basis of Be the Voice, and it's going to continue to grow. I hope we're passing it on to the next generation, who are also doing a tremendous job right now. They've expanded to different universities throughout Canada. We're hoping to expand into the US, but it's something that shows that it's such a prominent problem in our world, and it's something that I'm very excited to and really passionate about, spreading the message, getting people involved. And so again, I really want to thank you, Reg and Rose, for bringing us all together today, having this open discussion, because at the end of the day, this is what needs to be done in order to change and continue moving into a growth where there is no systemic racism, in a place where Karli's kids don't have to grow up worrying about when they're going shopping, feeling that they can't get an education, or that they're put in an environment where they are looked down upon. And so this communal and gathering, this semicircle has been amazing, and I'm really excited to continue sharing stories and hear more amazing stories from everyone. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jacob. And what really resonated with you is the power of talking and sharing our stories and sharing our experiences, because not everyone has the same experience. And I'm going to switch over to my friend Patti Pon. And Patti, you've been a storyteller and an advocate for a more just society for a long time in our community. Curious to hear from you today, your thoughts on this topic.
Thank you very much, Chima, and I am so grateful to be among all of you today in this space and in this time. And so I was thinking of my story. What was I going to share today? I think the thing about systemic racism is it isn't always one thing. It's not one big thing, right? It's a whole series of small things that we encounter every day. And a very, very good friend of mine, J.D. Derbyshire, shared with me, as I was really trying to understand, how can I cope? On those days when you just had one too many things happen to you. And J.D. said, you know what, the way I look at it sometimes is, it's the arrows that you get in a day. Wow, I'm really surprised you have such a good accent, even though I'm born and raised in Canada. Wow, where you come from, really, being mistaken for the caterer at the conference, and can I get someone a glass of water or pour them something? I don't see color. I just get people around me who are really good at everything, are good at what we need. I know you're just a diversity hire. Every day you get those arrows. And every day I have to go home and pull those arrows out and find a way, find the solve that can repair those wounds so that I can go back out the next day knowing the same arrows are going to hit me. And sometimes they're bigger, sometimes they go deeper, sometimes even though you think you dodge it, it just brushes off you and it still gets you anyway. And so, something that Reg shared with us about survival, right? That with the identities we carry, sometimes it's just about getting through the day and surviving. And we do so in a context where we carry many, like the term of the day, microaggressions, right? It isn't only because I'm a person of color, or only because I'm a woman, or only because I work in the not-for-profit sector, not the corporate sector where real people work, or where serious people work, or that's, the great one is like, you eat such funny food when we go for dim sum. And so I think for me, how do we address that? And both Karli and Jacob have been so great in saying it. You see it. You recognize that for those of us who survive or who cope or who manage to pull the arrows out every day and still come back the next day, that there is a journey that we have been on and we continue to be on. And what we're asking of people, what this time is asking of us, is to come on the journey in all the identities, all the ways in which you are and in which you live in this world, and share in that. I think the other thing sometimes that I know friends who are brave enough to speak with me, who are white or who are from the dominant culture, will go, like they're afraid of saying the wrong thing, or they're afraid of someone of getting backlash when they go back to their dominant communities and cultures. Because, why are you doing that? You didn't do anything. It's not your fault that there were residential schools. And it's like, come into a conversation with me that says, oh, well, because of residential schools, you benefited. Your families benefited. You got land that never belonged to you. I got to come here. My dad came here. My mom was born in Castor, Alberta, the only Chinese family in a small town. Like, how do you like them apples? But, and so you have to understand your part in the journey. And we can't have that. That's not a tagline somewhere. It's about a deep relationship. So I have learned so much on my reconciliation journey that has then fed me in one around racism. Like, how many times did I hear in the last 2 years, go home, you brought the disease here, go back to where you came from? How many times have my friends heard that? And there's only so many times you can tell people to go pound sand before. And so I think it's about this understanding. It's about recognizing that we're all here and we're all here together, and the way we'll get through this is together. And regardless of the many ways that we walk in this world, that we are in this world. And I think the last thing I would just want to share is it's also not like pie. So if the system changes, it's not like the pie's the same and you're going to get less. Your piece is going to be smaller because you're welcoming so many other people in. And a really wonderful artist, Renalta Arluk, from the Northwest Territories, she's Inuit. She goes, I like to think of it as we're making a cake. And it's many layers. And it's any color and any flavor of cake you want, but it's a big cake. And the more of us that are there to contribute ingredients, to bring more flour, to bring more flavors in, the better the cake will taste and the bigger it will be, so that there's enough for all of us. And so, you know, I would go to, I guess my message to those of you who might feel fear is, let's think about what flavor that cake could be. Let's think about how awesome it could be and how big your piece could be if that's what you want. But that'll be one that we share in making together and then kind of eating together. That's my final thought.
Oh, that's great. You've now made me hungry, though, for cake. You know, Patti, you talked about we're on a journey, you know, and we're trying to bring others along on the journey. And Beth, you've been a leader in our community for such a long time. Not that long. I'm not saying we're old. But, you know, and through your work and through your passions, you've been a leader trying to advance equality in our community through your work and I know through your personal life. And I'm sure you have some thoughts on this conversation and how we go forward.
Thank you, Chima. First, I'm very humbled that you actually say that. That really means something to me. Thank you. Yeah, I'm grateful to be here with all of you today. And I'm really grateful to Reg and Rose in particular for helping me on my journey and helping me to deepen my thinking and deepen my own understanding about what equity means. And, you know, as a white cisgendered woman, a member of the privileged written Western world, it's been really important for me to listen differently. And Patti, many of the conversations that we've had over the years, and Chima, you and I have had over the years, have all contributed to my awareness and to taking blinders off that I know were deliberately placed on me by the system within which I grew up. And, you know, I remember, Reg and Rose, one of the very early conversations that we had 4 or 5 years ago, and we were speaking about the concept of dominion, and I come back to that often, and you know that, about the concept of dominance, which is the exact opposite of the concept of equity, and the exact opposite of the concept of sanctified kindness, and all of us being part of creation. And that damaging idea and that damaging concept, combined with the equally damaging concept and idea that we as humans are not emotional beings, and that we should separate our emotion and just be human doings instead of human beings and human feelings. These have been incredibly destructive concepts and ideas that have developed incredibly destructive practices and actions like the residential schools, like the experiences that Karli, Patti, and Jacob are all describing. So for me, in my own work, in my own journey, I try to think of myself as an accomplice. I'm trying to think about, in listening and learning from each of you and the people that, you know, I encounter in my life, what does it mean for me to take another step in my own journey? What is it that I need to unlearn and be very aware of unlearning? What are then the things that I can do within the system of which I have been a beneficiary to unravel it? What are those acts of unraveling, you know, that I can take? What are the fierce discussions that I can get into? What's that good trouble that John Lewis would say, you know, that I can participate in? And it doesn't make it easy. Well, why should it be any easier for me than it is for anybody else? So, you know, one of the things that I am trying to do is to understand and to take instruction. When people say, Beth, this is what you need to learn, or this is what you should say, okay, that's a learning moment, and that's something that I can do and I can act on. And as a contributor in community, that's something that I'm committed to doing more of.
Thank you so much, Beth. You know, it's when we think about this journey that we're on, and I think, you know, this conversation has been so powerful because we live in this busy Western world where there's a schedule and there's a deadline, and we're all under a lot of pressure. And to take the time and take the space to have the conversation about what's actually really happening, I think this is so important, and I hope the people who are listening to this will take the time in their own lives to have this conversation with their friends and their family and their coworkers, and it doesn't actually have to be a difficult conversation if you set a safe space, as we've done here. Rose, I'm going to turn it over to you, because we saved the best for last. Please, we'd love to hear your thoughts and share your experiences.
Thank you, Chima. Just having a discussion about racism, this is a really enriched discussion. And even having a conversation of talking about yourself, what you went through. And I think this is what I'm going to share with the group. I grew up with from my parents, and my parents went through a lot through residential school. So they didn't let me attend a residential school, to stay at the residential school. I was a day school student. And thinking about my dad said, Rose, you're going to have to get an education so you can help our community. And that's the only way we're going to be with mainstream society. He was already talking in that sense. And then my grandparents would say, well, don't forget who you are. Remember that. So I had all those in my thought. Went to school, and we went to school where nobody was treated differently. We all played, laughed, we cried, and we had crazy times we did together. And then when we went into high school, it kind of changed. I went into town school. It kind of changed. People looked at you differently, and you kind of said, what did I do? Did I do something wrong? It was like that. But I got used to it, because when we went to town, to cities, people would look at you kind of, And I knew that spirit. When I went in a public place, you could feel that spirit, that people are going to treat you different. They're going to look at you different. But I just kept moving along, got married. And Reggie and I, we experienced some crazy things while we were growing up, and we wanted to be successful ranchers, but yet we couldn't, because we were still governed by our Indian affairs, because you could only do so much in this. But we didn't quit. We just kept going. We had our children, and I remember one day my girl said, Mom, we should go someplace. I said, I signed us up for a mothers and daughters workshop in Lethbridge. I said, okay. I said, dress up. So we all dressed up, and we drove down to Lethbridge. And when we got there, my two girls stepped at the door, and they said, Mom, we don't want to go in. I said, why? Well, we're the only natives here. I said, so we're going in. We came here to better ourselves. Let's go. So we went in, and, gee, Mom, I don't know what to share. I said, hey, you got to share what you believe in. That's why we're here. We want to have a good communication, good relationship, and we could share what we have with the other mothers and the daughters. And some of the mothers, their faces were turned red, and I thought, oh, I must have said something. Then I said, that's okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I always saying I'm sorry. I used to think, why am I always saying I'm sorry? Just be yourself, Rose. So anyways, we did. But the facilitator was a German woman. And when we met each other, I knew this woman is gonna take us places, because she was a psychologist, and she was a world traveler, and we got a real good relationship with her. So with that, just with her giving us that information, we shared, and then I told my children, okay, now you guys treat everybody as equals, no matter who they are. And this is what my parents used to tell us, treat everybody. And just listening back when Reg started that sanctifying kindness, well, we all have it. Everybody in this world has it, but you put it aside and you became greater. You became the superior being of everything, even of our animals, our plants, and of our atmosphere, of everything, the environment. because our environment is slowly disappearing, and we need to come back. You need to ground yourself back to exactly who are you and what can you contribute to make this world a better place. I give those teachings to my children, my grandchildren, and now my great-grandchildren. So sometimes I think, did I really teach my children something? But hearing my granddaughter speak, oh, she just filled my heart and my mind. And hearing Jacob speak, that it's going to change. Because with those discussions and being who you are, will really make this world better. And Beth, I really love the way you speak and how you've grown from when I first met you. Even, I'll say this, when we got invited, Daisy and Joanne invited us to an AGM downtown by the university. And you could feel it when you're in a position like everybody's, like, you could just feel the tension. Well, why are those people here? What are they doing? Why did they get that guy to say I could feel that in my mind, but I just sat there with a smile, and I looked at Karen and Beth, and I smiled. We're going places. That's all I could. So that's all I have to share today, and I love everybody, and I wish everybody could. Well, I know we grow through those stages as a young teenager and all that. We become a rebel within ourselves, so I think now I have to slow down. Thank you.
I'm pretty sure, Rose, you don't know how to slow down. I think you're just speeding up. Reg, I'm going to invite you to close us in a good way.
Maybe before we close, I was the discussion. I enjoyed the discussion. I think we need more of these discussions. But as Rose was talking, I was thinking about, I was raised before I went to residential school in that world where nobody was stronger than anybody and where we needed everybody to survive. And that's how I took on my challenges. But when I was, the Indian agent came to my grandmother and took me to residential school, I went through a transformation at residential school. I was colonized, I was taught to read and write, but at the residential school, I would think about freedom. What would it be if I can leave residential school? From 5 years old, I did my 9 years at residential school, and it's those 9 years I thought of freedom. What is freedom? What did freedom feel like? I knew how it felt before I went to school. So those were things that conditioned me to, I guess, accept racism, how I was going to be treated after residential school. But I remember the days when I was young and we went to town. In the local town, there was washrooms. There were still washrooms for the Indian washrooms and the white man washrooms. There were still fountains that we could drink out of and others we couldn't. There was still restaurant doors where we had to go in from one door and others. And I remember those days, and I struggled through those days because I retaliated. Even on the streets of the local town, I retaliated as a young man. But each time you get hurt and you retaliate, you end up being the one that's going to be incarcerated. You're the one being blamed. You're the one going to take the punishment and you're only trying to deal with what was hurting inside of you each time you step out. But we've come a long way to teach our children to deal with those frustrations, to go back to the smudge and view the world from that sanctified kindness and be open and have those discussions. And It was a hard world back then, but now I'm glad that we still face racism every day, but we're finding ways to hear each other, to understand each other, to know what the smudge is as an alternative system in gathering and calling to order. We're looking at relationship building as an alternative system to partnerships and allies. We're looking at oral knowledge to contribute to the greater Canadian society. And I think the people from oral knowledge have a lot to offer. We need to start using the smudge to hear them. So I just want to say that I'm grateful to be a part of this circle. I'm grateful that I was able to do my smudge, because I know at residential school, when I was going to school, I never ever thought in my lifetime I'd be sitting in a circle to start with a smudge so that we could have our discussion, a safe discussion, because at residential school this was forbidden. We weren't supposed to do that. So I'd just like to thank you all today for your contributions, and I'll pass it back to our host.
Well, I just want to thank everyone here for sharing their stories and speaking so eloquently about, really what can be a very difficult conversation. And Reg, I want to especially thank you and Rose for teaching us about sanctified kindness and sharing the smudge and creating this safe space. And Reg, I invite you to close us off in a good way.
Well, we'll acknowledge again Creator and the space that He provides us with so we can all survive together. Okay, ai stipatapia, ai onapi natos, o kitans kachimadan Christicoy. Ai spomoki nana no tomta ansktomta pe ipo spinanaka. Anik naksawasi Christatuchi sinanak. Ai onakito manischika gimakpinanis sochika tsikapo. O kini tuikis stipatapia to kanawatsumo is kanakanata piwakais. Ai nochika kimak. O akita piksasu kanino kasi mis kukus. Ayo apsatokiamuk nanischipo spinanak. Ayo akutsi mawanaka maksawatas isa Christatoksau. Aneka nochkichitapio. O kapsatoki gagoksis katopia kamutan nesta wachiman aksipatapios. And I thank you very much. Hey.
Thank you all.
Hey.
Go right on the button.